What's going on, ProGuides fam? It's Sergeant Frost, and today we'll be talking about Valorant's most iconic sentinel, Killjoy. Killjoy was one of the first characters to be added to the game, and ever since, she has seen widespread use through all of the metas and updates, and that makes her all the more important to pick up. So get ready to take notes, like the video, and let's get straight into it. Firstly, let's go over her abilities. Killjoy has a kit that's very well suited for what she was designed to do, and that's holding down space with her abilities. Her signature is of course her turret, which detects targets in front of it in a 180-degree cone, and it shoots them in short bursts that do anywhere from 12 to 24 damage depending on range. 24 damage of course isn't a lot, it's less than a single phantom bullet, so the turret isn't great for raw firepower. What it is really good at, however, is holding down multiple angles at once in order to have something to peek off of, or just to gather good info. Then you have her alarm bot. The alarm bot will cost you 200 credits, which is just as much as her other purchasable ability, her nano swarm. Killjoy's alarm bot is an ability you can place, and on placement it will quickly go invisible. Then it will wait for an enemy to get in range for it to activate. Once it does, it'll alert Killjoy and temporarily double the damage if it hits. Lastly are her nano swarms, and they are basically just mollies that you can pre-place and activate whenever. It makes it so that they combo very well with your alarm bot, as those will reveal when to activate your mollies, and on top of that, it even doubles the damage. Oh, and of course she also has her ultimate, which is her lockdown. Lockdown can be placed in order to start a 13-second countdown, impacting a decently large size area around where it was placed. When the count hits 0, it detains anyone still in range, which essentially comes down to not being able to wield guns, move at full speed, or do anything to damage opponents for that matter, making you quite vulnerable. So even though it costs 7 ult points to use it, and when it's placed it can be destroyed by shooting it before it goes off, it's still a really strong ultimate. Now before we continue, let's quickly ask the question of the day. Today's question being, how do you feel about Killjoy as an agent? Personally, I think Killjoy is in a really good state. She's great to play on a couple of maps, and on another few she's not that great, but also not terrible. Basically, her levels of meta-ness are very healthy, and I'm glad to see her in my games, both on my team and the enemies. But what do you guys think? Make sure to comment your thoughts down below. And now let's continue on. You can use Killjoy's kit in a lot of different ways, but there are some pretty general rules to follow that everyone should be aware of. First of all, you don't always want to put all your utility on the same set of angles. If you're playing Killjoy, your kit can cover a lot of ground, which makes it so that your team will have a lot more space to work with and are more free to rotate around the map. But you can also use your utility for yourself only, stashing your mollies, alarm bot, and even your turret all on the same main entrance. The latter one might help you out getting easy kills for yourself. But if you want to get consistent value out of your kit, and perhaps even want to give your teammates a bit of a helping hand as well, well then opting for scenario 1 is a lot more preferable. But of course, having a good grasp of both playstyles is great for different situations. So if you want to master both playstyles or have someone help you figure out which to use, head over to ProGuides.com, where our rating and immortal level coaches are more than happy to give you a hand. The link is in the description if you're interested, and now let's keep moving on. On top of that, you should also remember that both your alarm bot and your turret have quite a small max range, as in maximum range, that you can be away from them. That is in order for them to remain active. If you move out of that range, not only will your utility not work, but it'll even make a sound cue as it's deactivating, meaning that your enemies are instantly alerted to the fact that you left the area open. Definitely not what you want. The exception to this rule are your nano swarms. Those can be anywhere, and they'll be ready to get activated no matter how far away you are. So definitely keep that in mind if you want to use them to help your teammates on the other side of the map. For example, if they don't have mollies themselves and they might need it on main or on a default plant spot. That way you can really expand your impact map wide, without having to leave your utility out of range. And lastly, this tip is not Killjoy specific, as it works for Viper and KO. But if you want to throw lineups, what you can do is mark where it will land, aim there, look up, and then run. Look at the edge of the footsteps range and then throw as soon as it gets on the edge. That way, as long as the ground level is pretty even, and there's no obstructions, your molly will land in the correct spot. Pretty useful if you don't happen to have an exact lineup. Alright, so now that we know the basics, let's focus on some more side-specific things. Starting with attack. So on attack, Killjoy is perhaps not the greatest as she is a sentinel, and because she needs to stay in range in order for her turret and alarm bot to remain active, she's also not the best flank watcher, at least not as good as Cypher or Chamber. To make up for that, however, her kit is definitely a lot more suited for playing together with a team, even on attack, and some of her abilities can almost be used a bit like you would an initiator. Take her mollies for example. If you learn some lineups and know how to throw them on the fly, you can easily use them to force your opponents out of strong positions. And if you watched a lot of Iceland, I'm sure you've seen it happen. Your Killjoy mollies might not have been intended to be used that way, as the idea pretty much is that you pre-place them, but it doesn't mean that it's not effective. Another thing that's really effective though is using your turret or alarm bot to clear angles. Take pizza on ascent for example. Clearing that can be pretty difficult as you're highly exposed to market. But if you place an alarm bot and wait a second for it to activate or not, well then you instantly know if that corner is something to worry about. If you see a sus smoke, well, same idea. Just place your alarm bot inside and your opponent will be forced to run out, or they'll get spammed. And if you yourself are in a smoke instead, well, you can also make good use of your abilities by placing your turret just outside of it. That way you can swing as soon as it shoots, so you'll have a good idea of where exactly your opponents are. And of course, your ultimate is another great initiating tool, as it can basically give you control of a spike site. So right off the bat, your kit already has 3 abilities that are very well suited for attack. On top of that, your kit is also great in post-plant, as you would kind of expect from a Sentinel. But certainly with Killjoy, this is all the more true. Not only can you make re-entering the bomb site a lot more difficult with your turret, but you can do the same with your alarm bot, and you can even use your ultimate and nanoswarms to stall a potential defuse. The best way to use your nanoswarms here would be again to use lineups, as otherwise it can easily happen that you use them too late. Your opponents are already walking on site, and they have the time to shoot them. When using a lineup, they can still be shot of course, but it's a lot less risky than just praying your opponents don't properly clear them out. One tip though, if you intend on pre-placing your mollies and not using lineups, one of the ways to do that is by using objects and textures in order to place your mollies in hard to see places, like here and here. That way your mollies are harder to spot, and thus harder to clear out preemptively. Of course, since you're still a Sentinel, watching the flanks is usually kind of your job. So then you might wonder, what should you use? A turret or an alarm bot? And for that, we essentially say use an alarm bot if it's possible, mostly since your turret is more valuable. But since it's easier to cover more ground with your turret, and the max range you can be away from it is identical, you're going to run into a lot of situations where you'll have no choice but to use your turret, or else your flank watch will just deactivate. Of course, as we previously mentioned, another huge part of your kit on attack is your ultimate. But unlike a lot of people think, you can't just use it willy-nilly, and it actually requires some good planning for it to really work. In order for you to have the chance to use your lockdown a lot, which you'll definitely want to be the case, first of all, you're going to have to start framing ultimate orbs. Farming orbs means you'll be getting your ultimate at a faster pace, and that's not only important in order to get more lockdowns out, but also in order for your lockdowns to be more successful. Killjoy's ultimate can be countered by a lot of things, Breach's Aftershock for example. But even on maps where Breach isn't played, you can expect for your lockdown to be countered by Sova ultimates, Brimstone ultimates, or even another lockdown from an enemy Killjoy. If you get countered that way, there's nothing you can do. But in order to avoid it, you can try to stay ahead in the ultimate economy, which you can do by farming orbs. Luckily though, if you manage to get ahead the first time around, and you indeed get your lockdown out before your opponents are able to get their Sova ultimate online, then you won't have to stress as much, as they'll probably hold on to it in order to stop you the second time around. Meaning that even if you stop farming orbs, you kind of force your opponents to save their Sova ult nonetheless, as if they do use it, you're able to get another round with an uncountered lockdown in. The most important lesson here though is to keep track of both your own and your enemy's ultimates, how close everyone is, and if you should be going full throttle on ultimate orbs, or if you can relax a bit. On defense, however, is where you'll get the most value out of Killjoy's kit, and that's of course from Killjoy's defensive setups. Now before we go in depth about more advanced defensive tips, you should know that there's 2 types of Killjoy setups. Kill setups, which are more selfish and have a goal of creating one really strong bomb site, which can allow Killjoy to pick up multiple kills if the enemies dare to push it. These types of setups are great for really holding down one bomb site, but aside from providing one person with a lot of assistance to have an easier time defending, they don't do much. Then you also have a second type of setup, an informational one, and those are a lot more consistent. Valorant is a game all about information, and having a good amount of it can make it very easy to have a good idea of what your opponents are doing, and where they can and can't be is extremely helpful as well. It allows teams to cheat players over to where they expect opponents to attack early, and in general, it helps keep the levels of paranoia down on the team and it brings certainty. To give you an example of these types of informational setups, take the one on Ascent B, where you have a turret watching deep main and an alarm bot watching middle, combine this turret with a Sova ready shock on contact, and suddenly your setup is not only deadly but also gives your team a whole lot of info. A similar setup that brings a lot of info is one that G2 runs on Icebox, and it's by having a turret top screens and also an alarm bot mid in order to have both fully covered. Add in a molly on the entryways or plant spots, and both of these setups provide an immense amount of value every single round. Kill setups are also used of course, but these are a lot more common in lower ranks as they're prone to being predictable, being avoided, or just in general they aren't as consistent as information setups. Nonetheless, an example of this would be the classic B Ascent setup, an alarm bot holding the main to lane run out, and 2 mollies on lane as well. And another one of my personal favorites is on Split, by putting a turret either on heaven or right outside of main, same for the alarm bot, and then also 2 mollies in order to fully block the standard pathways. Of course again, your lockdown is important, but on defense, its strongest use really is just in retakes, so be sure to use it when you can. One important thing to consider however is that when you do end up playing retake, don't just expect your teammates to know. The worst thing that can happen is that you leave A open to play retake with lockdown, only for 3 teammates to run back onto it before you actually use it, because they didn't realize what your plan was. And the final thing we have to mention is that a lot of your utility has some very creative uses. You can use your alarm bot to take deeper control on defense, but you can also, like we mentioned, use your turret not only to get some early info on B main of Ascent, but even to allow your Sova to do tons and tons of chip damage with well-placed shock darts. Well guys, that's gonna wrap it up for now, so hopefully it helped. We definitely enjoyed making this video and we hope you like seeing it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more content like it. This has been your host Sergeant Frost, and I'll see you all again in the next one.